I do believe 2006 X-Men The Last Stand gets a bit of a bad rap. It has problems, most of which were thankfully undone in 2014's Days of Future Past, but the film itself, I still think, is an enjoyable addition to the franchise. There's some great moments in there, and wonderful visual effects and action sequences. First things first, Bryan Singer had gone off to do Superman Returns, so he wasn't available to direct this one, so Brett Ratner took the helm instead. There's two big disappointments I and most X-Men fans have with The Last Stand. Specifically the deaths of both Charles Xavier and Cyclops. Dealing with the second one first, I always liked the character of Scott, Cyclops, and I found him to be a grossly underutilized character in these films. I certainly thought he was worthy of more than just being in the awkward love triangle between himself, Logan, and Jean Grey. The studio was unhappy that James Marsden was going to be working on Superman Returns and the scheduling conflicts that created. So Cyclops was rather unceremoniously killed off early on in the film by Jean, who had returned as the character Phoenix and serves as the film's primary villain. It's a deeply unsatisfying ending for Scott, and it should never have happened. It's so sudden, and it lacks any emotion or meaning. I think this was just a really bad decision, and very much a disservice to the character. It's just as well, then, that the time-travelling hijinks of Days of Future Past undid his death some years later. Now, Charles Xavier's death is handled a little better, in that it's mourned a great deal more and impacts upon the characters in a more meaningful way, but it too happens way too early, with still half the movie to go. Charles' absence from the rest of the film is really felt, and the film is just that little bit lesser without him. His resurrection never really made any sense to me, though the idea of transferring consciousness into a comatose patient is mentioned early in the film, and set up as the means by which Charles returns in a post-credit scene. It's still very odd. It's actually never mentioned in the film that the man in the coma is Charles' twin brother, P. Xavier, but that's been the suggestion in the director's commentary. So when Charles returns at the end of The Wolverine, and again in Days of Future Past, he's apparently using the body of his twin brother. Okay, I guess his twin brother also can't use his legs and needs a wheelchair? Strange, because we know that Charles wasn't born that way. Okay, but this is only the case until such time as the events of The Last Stand are completely undone in Days of Future Past. So at the end of Days of Future Past, and again in Logan, Charles is back to his original body. Okay. In Deadpool and Wolverine, we meet an alternate universe version of Logan, and in his world, Charles' twin was female, Cassandra Nova. Regardless, Charles' return was a mess and poorly handled in terms of the canon of the films. But I really like the concept and the stakes of this story. Essentially, a cure has been developed to suppress the mutant gene permanently, thus neutralizing any threat that mutants can ever pose to humans. Certainly this creates an interesting ethical dilemma. It would, of course, only further escalate the war against mutants, but it would mean the world could at least defeat Magneto and his mutants once and for all. Trouble is, the good mutants on Xavier's side and the X-Men might get caught in the crossfire. For Rogue, however, it presents an attractive opportunity, the chance to at last live a normal life where she can have a relationship with her boyfriend Bobby without killing him. As Hank McCoy, Beast, points out, many mutants would accept giving up their abilities if it meant ending their persecution. Magneto is convinced the so-called cure will be forced upon mutants, and so he wants to rally an army to fight. Incidentally, the opening scene with the de-aging of himself and Charles, it's not so bad actually in hindsight. It works reasonably well for Charles, but it's not quite so convincing for Eric. Though it does the job, considering how early on this was in CGI de-aging. Anyway, the plan by the US government is to weaponize the cure, which Hank McCoy is against. He believes it should be voluntary. Both Magneto and Charles are looking for Phoenix, and in their efforts to retrieve her, she kills Charles. It's a highly dramatic and well-staged scene, great effects, and there's a huge emotional shock factor in Charles being killed off, but I never liked his death personally. Now, the fallout is on both sides. Magneto's long-standing and loyal henchwoman, Raven, Mystique, is accidentally shot with the cure, trying to protect Magneto, and she quickly becomes human, losing her mutant powers of shapeshifting. In a memorable moment, Magneto turns his back on her, saying that she's no longer one of them. She's deeply shocked and hurt by this betrayal, and eventually seeks revenge on him by giving the US military the location of Magneto's base of operations. As the president remarks, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." The film has a great build-up to the final action scene. From the fight scenes in the forest right up to the huge Golden Gate Bridge sequence and then the end battle at Alcatraz, every mutant on both sides is well used and gets a chance to shine. It feels dramatic, high stakes, and certainly a story worthy of a big X-Men conclusion. The secondary characters are given decent send-offs, but Logan is kind of left a little bit in limbo at the end of the movie. He's sort of just there, and we don't know what exactly he plans to do next. Though his final moment with Jean, I think, is extremely poignant in that last action scene. At least Storm is given the position of headmistress, replacing Charles. Rogue and Bobby finally get together, and Magneto's powers are neutralized, although we see at the end that they're slowly returning, so I guess the effects of the cure are only temporary. Too bad for Rogue and Bobby then. Ultimately, The Last Stand didn't shine as brightly as X2, which I feel was like the X-Men's Wrath of Khan. It was so good. It was the best of the original three. But The Last Stand is not only undermined by its problems, which I've mentioned, but also by the fact that the entire story is undone due to the time travel events of Days of Future Past. So I suppose this means the film doesn't really matter, but in actual fact, the film can therefore be just enjoyed for what it is. A decent enough, if slightly undercooked, 2-hour superhero action movie that throws an enormous amount of X-Men characters on screen at once and gives us some epic action scenes. I think it has one of the strongest final acts of any of the X-Men movies and uses the character of Phoenix far better than 2019's Dark Phoenix. I never disliked X-Men The Last Stand. I just wish it could have been that little bit better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.